Imagine waking up as Keir Starmer on Budget Day, expecting the usual political theatre, perhaps some grumbling from the opposition, maybe a few critical headlines, and then you look out the window of number 10 to see 2,000 tractors descending on Westminster like a rural rebellion straight out of a British period drama, except this time the peasants really are revolting and they have brought agricultural machinery. Farmers, those supposedly quiet, stoic guardians of the British countryside, have had absolutely enough of Rachel Reeves's inheritance tax changes, and they are making their displeasure known in the most British way possible, by parking tractors outside Parliament, dressing up as Father Christmas with a naughty list that includes half the cabinet, and completely ignoring Metropolitan Police orders banning agricultural vehicles from central London. This is not your typical Westminster protest with polite placards and orderly chanting. This is a full-scale agricultural uprising, and it is glorious, chaotic, and absolutely terrifying for a government that clearly did not see it coming. Quick favor, if you are already loving this rural rebellion, hit that subscribe button and smash that notification bell. Over 94% of you brilliant viewers have not subscribed yet. It is absolutely free, takes 2 seconds, and genuinely means a world to us here at British Mirror. Cheers if you did. Now, back to the agricultural anarchy. So let us set the scene properly, because what unfolded in Westminster is the kind of protest that will be talked about for decades. Budget Day, one of the most important days in the parliamentary calendar, when the Chancellor stands up to announce how the government plans to tax, spend, and generally interfere with everyone's lives for the next year. Normally, the streets around Parliament are filled with journalists, political advisors, maybe a few standard protesters with signs. Not this time. This time, central London was absolutely invaded by tractors. Not 10 or 20. 2,000. 2,000 tractors driven by farmers from across the country who decided that polite letters to MPs and respectful meetings were not cutting it anymore, and direct action was required. The Metropolitan Police, bless them, tried to prevent this. They issued restrictions explicitly banning agricultural machinery from the Westminster area. They put out statements. They warned protesters. They did everything short of building a moat around Parliament. And the farmers, to their eternal credit, completely ignored them. One tractor was parked directly outside Parliament on Abingdon Street, and it was not just any tractor. This tractor bore the slogan, "Fools Vote Labour," which is about as subtle as a brick through a window and exactly the kind of messaging that makes politicians very nervous. More tractors were seen driving through Westminster throughout the morning, creating traffic chaos, photo opportunities, and absolute headaches for police trying to enforce their ban. Police managed to stop about 20 tractors in the immediate area, which sounds impressive until you remember there were 2,000 of them. That is like claiming you have successfully defended a castle because you caught 20 soldiers whilst 2,000 more walked through the front gate. One of the stopped tractors was particularly brilliant. The farmer was dressed as Father Christmas, complete with costume, and his tractor was parked on Whitehall carrying a large spruce tree. But this was not a jolly Christmas message. The tree had a sign reading Farmer Christmas, the naughty list followed by a who's who of Labour's top brass: Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, David Lammy, Diane Abbott, Angela Rayner, and delightfully, the BBC. The BBC made the naughty list alongside government ministers, which tells you everything about how farmers view media coverage of their plight. The Metropolitan Police issued a statement trying to maintain some semblance of authority. Anyone breaching conditions by bringing vehicles, including tractors or agricultural vehicles, to today's farmers' protest will be asked by officers to leave. If they refuse to comply with the conditions, officers will have to make arrests for offences under the Public Order Act. Which sounds very official and stern until you realize they are threatening to arrest Father Christmas on a tractor in the middle of London on Budget Day. The optics of that would have been absolutely catastrophic for the government. Can you imagine the headlines? Police arrest Father Christmas during farmer protest. Labour would never recover. The police claimed they spoke to several people to advise them of the conditions, and whilst the majority listened and complied, several arrests have been made. Several. Out of 2,000 farmers with tractors. That is not effective crowd control. That is token enforcement designed to look like they are doing something whilst actually having zero ability to stop what is happening. The force tried to justify the tractor ban by claiming agricultural vehicles would cause serious disruption to the local area, including businesses, emergency services, and the public, which is technically true. 2,000 tractors absolutely cause serious disruption. That is rather the point of a protest. If protests were convenient and non-disruptive, there would not be protests, there would be strongly worded letters. The police statement added that people would still be able to demonstrate, but must remain in a specified area on Richmond Terrace, Whitehall, which the farmers also largely ignored, because being corralled into a designated protest zone defeats the entire purpose of making your voice heard. It is like telling someone they can scream, but only in this soundproof room where nobody will hear them. The farmers understood that the power of their protest lay in disruption, visibility, and making it impossible for Westminster to ignore them. So what triggered this agricultural uprising? What could possibly make thousands of farmers drive tractors into central London, risk arrest, defy police orders, and create absolute chaos? The answer is Chancellor Rachel Reeves' plan to introduce a 20% inheritance tax on agricultural land and businesses worth more than £1 million, starting in April 2026. Now, to anyone not familiar with farming, that might sound reasonable. £1 million sounds like a lot of money. Surely only wealthy landowners will be affected, but that completely misunderstand how farming works. Farmland is incredibly expensive, not because farmers are wealthy, but because land values have skyrocketed. A relatively modest farm can easily be worth well over £1 million on paper, whilst the family running it struggles to make ends meet year after year. Farming operates on incredibly thin profit margins. Bad weather, crop failures, livestock diseases, fluctuating market prices, any of these can wipe out a year's income. Farmers are asset-rich but cash-poor. They own valuable land but do not have massive bank accounts. So when the government announces a 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million, it is not targeting wealthy landowners living in mansions. It is targeting ordinary farming families who will have to sell off land to pay the tax bill when the previous generation dies, which makes the farm unviable, which forces them out of business. The sector is already struggling with rising costs, tough market conditions, and the worsening impact of climate change. Fuel prices have soared. Fertilizer costs have exploded. Labor costs keep increasing. Supermarkets squeeze farmers on prices whilst charging consumers more. And now the government wants to add inheritance tax on top of everything else. From the farmer's perspective, this is the final straw. This is a government actively trying to destroy British farming and making it impossible for family farms to pass to the next generation. One of the protest organizers is Dan Willis, who owns Rookery Farms near Newbury in Berkshire. He told journalists that he was absolutely devastated when the group was told the demonstration could not happen anymore, and that it was very hard to get the word out to everybody given the late notice. But here's the brilliant part. They were coming anyway, so unfortunately the Met have scored an own goal here. They created carnage. That sentence is magnificent. The farmers were coming regardless of police orders. The ban did not stop the protest. It just made it more chaotic and harder to manage. The Metropolitan Police, by trying to prevent the demonstration, actually made it worse. Own goal indeed. Willis continued, "We know it has come from government. We know they do not want to listen to us, whether it is in the House or on the street. But we need a road. We need to exercise our right to protest. At the end of the day, that is what is happening today." He is absolutely right. The right to protest is fundamental to British democracy. When the government stops listening, when letters get ignored and meetings go nowhere, direct action becomes necessary. And the farmers understand this perfectly. They are not professional protesters. They are not career activists. They are people who grow food for a living, and they have been pushed so far that they have abandoned their farms during one of the busiest times of year to drive tractors into London and demand to be heard. Willis added something that cuts right to the heart of this issue. These are all independent farmers who have come of their own volition. It is such an emotive issue. You are talking about death and losing family, a family asset, which is how we earn our living. And by the way, producing food, taxing the working people of this country, it is impossible for us to go on. That statement deserves unpacking because it perfectly articulates what is at stake. This is not about wealthy people avoiding tax. This is about families losing everything they have worked for across generations because the government does not understand or does not care how farming actually works. When a farmer dies and their children inherit the farm, they now face a 20% tax bill on everything over £1 million. For a farm worth £2 million, which is not remotely unusual, that is a £200,000 tax bill. Where do farmers get £200,000? They do not have that kind of cash lying around. Their wealth is tied up in land, equipment, and livestock, so they have to sell land to pay the tax. But selling land makes a farm smaller and less viable. Eventually, the farm cannot support the family anymore, and they have to sell everything. The family farming tradition ends. Corporate agricultural companies buy up the land. Food production becomes more consolidated and less resilient. This is not just bad for farmers. This is bad for Britain's food security. Willis's point about taxing the working people of this country is also crucial. When farms go out of business, food prices rise. When British farms disappear, we become more dependent on imports. When family farms are replaced by corporate operations, rural communities die. This inheritance tax does not just affect farmers. It affects everyone who eats food, which is everyone. Wednesday's protest was the latest in a series of demonstrations by farmers against the inheritance tax changes. In December, farmers drove tractors to Whitehall, with thousands protesting the decision they claim will put their businesses, their futures, and the country's food security at risk. That protest was orderly, respectful, and completely ignored by the government.